Couple weeks. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network, and I am your host, Briar Harvey. Today, I have my beautiful friend Morrigan.
See, at least you got the name right.
I did. Well, it's right in front of me, and that's helpful. That's
Yes.
helpful. Okay. So, if you missed us last time, we are diving in to an elemental system that is sort of magical, sort of not, sort of game based, sort of not. This is
Sort of sciencey, also sort of not. It depends how far we want to get in, really.
it really does. Okay, so I highly recommend that you go back and watch the introduction. I will link that in show notes. So today we're talking about Earth, the
Yep.
principles of Earth, the mechanics of the Earth element in your personal system, and how to work with it. So let's start at the top. What is Earth in charge of?
Structure. That's if we're going to encapsulate it in one word, it is structure. It's also hierarchy. It's also reputation, your core, um, your nobility too, which is an interesting concept. We can dive into a little bit more. But basically, it's the rules by which you live your life. It's where it tends to sink its little tendrils in and gel at you.
Yep, that's fairly accurate. And the main concerns of Earth are
You know, I prepared this and now I'm going to have to change it because it's yelling at me. Anyway, the main concerns of Earth are that you're being true to your word, that you are doing things efficiently in a process that makes sense, that you're not contradicting your efforts by building one thing over here and knocking it down over here equally quickly. It's very concerned with having your ducks in a row, with having whatever proofs you need to have in order to back up whatever claims you're making, and just generally dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. And it looks like we might even have lost Briar for a second. That's fun. We'll give that a minute. So the other thing Earth is really quite bothered about is getting to the core of what it is you're trying to do and making sure that that makes sense as well. Hi, you're back.
yes, I'm back, but I'm going to move you so that you're on the right side of the screen.
Woohoo.
The little switch dance. That was on me. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, hopefully my internet continues to behave because it was not earlier on. Anyway,
It's sunny blue sky days, so I got no excuse over here. Okay, so I think I have the mainstay here though. What does that look like in action?
well, in action, a healthy earth elemental that is doing what it's supposed to be doing will be making sure that you're proceeding in an orderly fashion, that all your T's are being crossed, all your I's are being dotted. If you have contracts that need to be done, they will in fact be done properly. If you have systems you need to create to fulfill the work or get more work, that will be taken care of too. If you need to make purchases in order to do the work, they'll be done in an orderly fashion as well. Really, this is the Virgo of your elementals, if we want to put it that way. Um, all the order, all the checklists, all the making sure that things are where they should be.
Hmm. Yes, I get along with mine fairly well now.
Yes, now.
Sometimes it's still an overgrown jungle, though. It's fine. It's fine. So, okay. So you said you wanted to talk about strengths and weaknesses. Let's start with strengths. Well, not
Not
strengths and
exactly. I
not
think what we were talking about was what happens when it is too strong
there we go.
and out of balance and throwing things off that way. And then what happens when it is too weak and throwing off balance in that direction. So
Fantastic.
we will start with what happens when it's too strong. Um, that is usually when you find yourself becoming too rigid. You cannot deviate from whatever plan you have made. You will plan forever and ever and ever, and it will be this beautifully intricate plan that will theoretically work. If only you don't sleep and only spend X amount of time for your meals, and if you do not have any feelings about the work you're doing at all. Carry on that way. It's the one that will tell you, okay, but we can't actually do any of these things until we go and get this accreditation and this degree, and you make sure that you've already gone and done all these testimonials over here, and everyone can prove that you know what you mean. It's the one that will get very, very concerned with being able to back up any claim you make, usually in triplicate. It's the one that will be like, well, no, we can't possibly try this new and slightly different idea because if we do that, then I will need to rewrite all of our contracts and change all our systems, and they work just fine, and that wouldn't work very well. So we're not doing that at all. And it also gets really wrapped up with the concept of fairness and what you are owed and what is justified. So, if you've got your earth elemental being particularly strong and overbearing, but you feel like you're doing a good job, that is when you won't be able to hear a critique or dissension or any sort of, hey, you might want to change your process a little bit over here, or maybe add this other thing here. The answer is going to be no, because you're doing just fine and the process has been working and you've been doing it for how many years and no one else has ever complained. So what? So, in a very real way, you become a lot more like stone when your earth is too strong. It's like all that pressure compacts in. And instead of being able to move and flow and work with your other elements as well, it becomes all about the earth all of the time. And eventually, you're not even able to grow things on your earth anymore because too much stone, not enough anything else, and you can't sustain life in your business or whatever we're talking about.
So that is when there's too much earth. What is too little earth?
So, too little earth takes a few different forms because really what we're talking about there is the vacuum created by not having enough structure. So that can play out in a handful of ways. The most common are either your air will take over, or your fire, or your water. We'll go through them in turn because they're all really entertaining to me, and this is one of my favorite parts. So, if your air takes over instead, what will happen is you will find yourself more prone to talking a good game, to coming up with these ideas endlessly over and over again. Constant ideas, sometimes good ones, sometimes absolutely terrible ones, but you'll just do ideas and talk about them and somehow never actually complete anything. This is where you can actually become quite charming if that's, within your other personality traits. And you'll be able to trick people into thinking that you're really, really good at doing the things, and you'll trick yourself into it too to an extent. but there's nothing backing up what you're saying. You're not actually working. This is where you'll go ahead and talk about maybe writing a book or something, and then spend all of your time talking about how you're writing a book to everyone that will listen without ever actually
Without
writing more
ever
than a
putting
sentence.
words on paper. Yep.
Yeah. So you'll have these beautiful, wonderful, fantastic dreams and plans and ideas that have no hope whatsoever of coming to fruition, because all that happens is you rip them out constantly and replace them with new ones. No time to grow. So that's what happens when air encroaches instead and takes over. Small pause. When water takes over, you wind up with a bit of a swampland where you're still not moving and creating things, but it's because you have so much meaning and feeling attached to everything. So, what happens there is you'll still be telling the stories and talking about stuff, but they'll be more emotionally laden stories. It's not like flitting around having these beautiful dreams and ideas constantly. It's more like getting bogged down and slogging through your history over and over. So, this is where you will do things like if you do post something, it'll be about a memory, or it'll be about how such and such thing reminded you of a trigger and here's why that's important. Or it'll often be the case that you just won't post, but you'll talk to your friends about how things are just too much and not enough all at once, because you're firmly living back here and all that's happening is the water's seeping into what your structure would have been, and instead of being able to build from it, it's just turning it into this marshy, foundationless swampland where you get stagnant water as well. So your
I
meaning and
just had
feelings
the image
aren't
of
moving.
Bastion in where the Never-Ending Story,
Yep.
where the horse dies because he's too sad.
Wasn't that like the Swamp of Sorrow or something? I don't remember
Despair.
exactly
I
what it's
can't
called.
remember the name. I just
Swamps of
remember that I'm
Despair, maybe?
scarred for life. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's fine.
Where you
That's
had to keep moving or you would sink into the
right,
swamp.
and that's exactly what
Basically,
that
yeah,
is. Mhm.
that's it. You're not growing anything there except for flies and that one funky smell you always find around swamps. So that's what happens when water takes over and tries to fix it by being too much. And then we get fire trying to fix it, which is even more fun. What happens when fire tries to fix it is first, you'll be incredibly productive for a period of time. This is where it uses what remains of your earth as structure fuel, and you try and push your way through it as a grind. But eventually, it runs out of tasks and structure and projects to focus on. It's burned it essentially to
We've
the ground.
literally called that burnout. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
this is your burnout recipe right here. Because what happens to fire is once it runs out of things to burn, it fizzles out and becomes weak and disappears also. So, really, fire doesn't so much take over for Earth as a strong fire and a weak Earth will only happen for a brief amount of time before you wind up with weak Earth and weak fire, and someone else will sweep in and mess with you. But yeah, that's what burnout looks like in real time.
and if I mean, not everyone is manic, so not everyone experiences this to this extent. But there is, I think, for most people, a glorious spurt of motivation in that forest fire that precedes
Oh, it's
burnout.
a real thing of beauty. I think the last time I properly experienced burnout that way was in my final year of college doing my degree. And bless, I didn't know that I was ADHD at the time. So I did the level of planning that only someone that is undiagnosed ADHD can do, where you make perfect plans for every single unit that you could not possibly complete within the time frame at all, even if it was the only unit you were focusing on, and then you try and do them all at once. So for that year, what it looked like for me was I would be up before 7. I would be in college for the whole time college was open. I would then get home and work into the night on the same stuff, sleep briefly, up, do it again for multiple months in a row. And I had considerable amounts of earth structure there because I'd put it in, which meant I didn't fully burn out until the last couple of weeks. And in those last couple of weeks, keeping in mind that the units prior to this, on my execution, I'd had like fails. So my grades looked like A for planning, A for design, A for pitch, fail for execution, A for evaluation. It was hilarious. Anyway, we get to the last couple of weeks, and I straight up forget to submit 2 different units entirely because I forgot they existed. And with the best will in the world, I'm like, I promise I will submit this over the summer. I could not submit it over the summer. I was done with computers for a good year and a half. And
arguably the rest of your life. But
well, I pushed through for like a decade. But anyway, yeah, that's a good point. I still don't like them. However, it was especially bad at that point. And after that, there was no motivation for a long time. I had to tiptoe through that one.
okay. So that's what an elemental imbalance looks like. One of the things that's important here is internal dialogue. And you've mentioned it a little bit, what it sounds like when there's an imbalance. But let's talk about what healthy Earth sounds like.
That one's a little bit trickier to answer because when your elementals are more or less in balance, you don't actually pick up on them quite as easily. They tend to alert you if there's an issue rather than if there's everything ticking along fine and happily. But they do make themselves known in that way. When the earth elemental is feeling quite healthy, you won't necessarily hear it in terms of specific phrases or complaints, but you'll notice it in a sort of settled feeling when you come to your work. Like, you know what you're supposed to be doing, and it has a logical progression from here to here. You're not really sat there wondering, oh no, what do I do next? Or should I be adding this other thing? Or what have you. You'll have made a plan, and it'll feel like a plan that is worth following through. But you'll also be able to change it with new data without feeling particularly panicky or anxious about it.
Okay. Talk more then about what it says when it's unhealthy.
How about I talk a little bit about what phrases you guys use that immediately say to me, oh, it's your earth elemental then. That might be a little bit more helpful. So, what I watch for that jumps out and screams at me is anything at all to do with needing to complete a prerequisite before you can do another thing. By that, I mean, if you have an idea and it's a specific type of business you're wanting to do or a service you're wanting to offer, and I hear anything along the lines of, but I'm not qualified to do that, or but I need to go and do this other thing first, or but I've not put that on my website yet. I'm guilty for that one constantly. Or something like, I don't know. I've not really tested this well enough yet. I'm also guilty for that one. That's a me thing. Um, Anything like that, immediately go, okay, hang on. Probably Earth or Earth adjacent. And then I listen a bit longer. And what I'm watching for at that point is how flexible you are with solutions to that problem. Because if I then say to you, okay, but a lot of people get started on this without having done that first. And your reaction to that is, oh, okay, really? That's fine then. My problem's probably this other thing. I go, okay, your Earth's fine ish. We might need to deal with it at some point, but you're okay because you can adapt. However, what happens fairly often is if I poke that a little bit, you'll go, yeah, but it's really important that I just do it right. And that would be sort of cheating or anything around there that says, well, no, but I have to do it because it's the proper way. That's another one
I'm
of the
hearing a lot of
telltale signs.
perfectionism. I'm
Mm-hmm.
hearing a lot of self-critique around process.
Yes. And the main reason for that is because the stronger Earth gets in an unhealthy way, the more it pulls in your dark elemental as well and your light. So when it's pulling in your dark elemental, it's saying things like, oh, but we're not going to be worthy unless we do XYZ. That's where they sort of bond together and have their mildly unholy alliance. If it's the light elemental that it's banding with, that'll be more along the lines of, okay, but if we don't do this thing, then it's going to ruin our reputation, or nobody will believe that I can do it, or it's just not going to look good enough. Two sides of the same very earthy coin there.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk troubleshooting then. I have identified that there is a conflict in my internal dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I have potentially identified Earth as the primary source of the problem. How do we fix it?
Well, if it's that your earth is too strong, usually what I suggest is people go and make friends with their air elemental, because what you don't really want to do is take a strong elemental and cut it down and make it weaker, because that just doesn't help anything. It usually means, though, that its opposing element is already too weak to hold its own. So you're going to want to shore that up. In this case, that would be air, which would be allowing more of your ideas out of the dark recesses of your brain and into the light somewhere. Usually by communicating them, but sometimes even just letting yourself have them is enough, and writing them down where you can see it, and then really trying hard not to immediately dismiss them, because it's not as if your air elemental stops having ideas ever. That's like the main portion of its job. But it can be a lot quieter comparatively if you have got your earth elemental yelling in your ear. So rather than trying to turn down your earth elemental, which you don't really want to do, because then you run the risk of having two weak elementals instead of one strong one and one weak one, is you want to turn up the volume on your air elemental. Now, if the problem is that your earth elemental is weak and that's causing everyone else to play up, then what you want to do with it is pay attention to where you're lacking structure and start putting little boundaries in place. Usually it's boundaries, to be perfectly
Yes.
honest.
I mean, for me personally, Earth is very much about, have you had those conversations with people that make you feel uncomfortable? Have you put into place the things that you know that you need, even though someone has in the past called you selfish for needing that thing? It's accommodations, it's boundaries, it's
Mhm.
very structural.
And that's at least partly because your elementals that you needed to shore up when your earth was kicking off and misbehaving were air, light, and a little bit of water. So that blended together for you to mean, okay, boundaries and talking, which is how that works. But yes, when Earth itself is too weak, you look more at carving out space for it in your life.
Mhm. And so we talked a little bit in the first episode about how to structurally do this work. Obviously, you and I have done it through the game.
Mhm.
There is journaling, there is meditation, there is internal work. How do you start defining the needs of this particular element? And then what are you doing structurally to care for it?
Okay, so for each element, in addition to all that stuff we talked about last week, whatever, they all have places where they feel most comfortable in your life, right? And that tends to follow the same rough set of rules from person to person, but it'll vary a little for personality and so on. But Earth, especially if you're trying to shore it up, is the most comfortable when you're doing things with your hands and when you are doing things that affect the structure of your life or your day or your house. I can remember.
Puttering is a big one for me. Putter cleaning, just moving
uh,
around and putting
See,
things away and
for
organizing.
me, it was furniture is usually where mine yells at me. I have this habit of buying new pieces of furniture when I finally figure out what I need to be there. But even before that, I would rearrange what I had whenever I was feeling particularly disconnected. I haven't had to do that for a while. I am still perfecting my structures, but it's in a peaceful, calm way. Um, the other place that shows up quite a lot is gardening, actually, which is a
Uh, w-
cliche, but we're going to say it
But
anyway.
is fairly obvious, yes.
But also in like flowers, bouquets, vases, stuff like that. Also, you'll probably find the earth is quite happy with crystals, being that they're usually of earth. So, there's the standard things will also work.
Yeah, it's just figuring out what you like personally and how to integrate more of those things into your life structurally.
Mhm.
Okay. When Earth is balanced, what does that look like practically speaking?
As in where earth and air are more or less balanced together
Mhm,
and you're just moving through life. Okay.
mhm.
So for that, it looks a lot like you have an idea, you go and execute on the idea. Maybe not immediately, because a lot of us are quite neurodiverse in this particular crowd here, but it doesn't feel like stabbing yourself with a fork to execute on the idea. You can
Woof.
reasonably plan it and execute on it. And it feels good to do. It doesn't feel like you're having to force yourself to go and do it. It doesn't feel like anything else would be more interesting. Your shiny object syndrome with other projects will diminish a little bit. It won't entirely go away, but it does go down a little when you're more or less balanced. And you are doing your paperwork, or you have got someone else to do your paperwork for you and is therefore satisfied in that regard. And generally it means that what you say you're going to do and what you do match up more often than not.
Okay. And for most of us, I think that's really a struggle, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's and not even from a lack of elemental balance. Sometimes this is just structurally neurological.
Yeah, there's a fine line here to be drawn between what you do with elementals and what is just your brain that you need to accommodate for. Um, Going to be very clear here, elemental work itself is never actually going to fully compensate for going and getting whatever treatment or accommodations you need the other way. What it is good for is pinpointing where you might need the extra help and, where things are not working and what things are working well. But it's not a curative, it's more of a diagnostic in that regard.
Agreed. And learning how to tap into your personal structure, I think, has been very beneficial for me in order to have the awareness to name those needs. Like, it's not that I didn't know them before, but I didn't have clarity around what they actually were. So I had to be able to structurally do that inner work before I went, oh, this is what I need. Okay.
So I have a story that
Okay.
is relevant. And we're going to do this now because we might as well do it with Earth, and it's the most entertaining time to do it. At a certain point of elemental work, you will figure out that your external surroundings quite often mirror your internal landscape, reality, what have you. There is a certain amount of correlation between which parts of your house are perpetually a mess or a disaster and which elementals are incredibly unhappy with you. Now, there's some variance in which chores match to which thing, but for me, I found out fairly early on that in addition to being quite particular about where the furniture goes, floors are Earth's problem 99.9% of the time. So, because I am ADHD and not always fully in touch with my own internal feelings and what is happening in real time, I can usually tell that things are starting to get a bit unraveled in the Earth quadrant when my floors have not been hoovered at least once a week and there is stuff over them. It's a different one when it's the surfaces, and it's a different one when it's windows. But Earth for me is very much hoovering, or vacuuming for you lot, I suppose.
Yes, we don't call
Heathens.
it hoovering. Like, we don't. Uh, we have robots now for that, most of us.
Well, I don't have a robot for that.
Well, and I
Also, they
was
would miss bits.
no, no, no. There's the robots are actually not bad. I would not know because my giant cat killed the one that we attempted to bring into the home. No one's shocked by this.
I
So,
hear people put googly eyes on theirs. That is the only thing I would find appealing about a robot
that's
doing it.
correct. It's fantastic.
Yep.
But what I was thinking here is that, and I know you are a single parent, but it's tough to tell what is whose in a house with five people here. Like, We're our own elemental catastrophes.
Indeed. However, I assume there is at least somewhere that is more yours in the house than not.
Oh, sure, my office.
Yes, that tends to be the case for most people. So rather than the whole house, if you're diagnostically looking at your elementals, you look at your space within the house. It just so happens that for me, basically it's the whole house, except for my kids' room and sometimes the living room. But you still notice it more strongly in your space as opposed to the public spaces.
Well, my floor is not bad then.
It might not show up there for you, but it's where it shows up for me.
No, realistically, I mean, I do not find a whole lot of fault with the idea that Earth is floor.
Do you know my favorite one that also annoys the heck out of me all the time? Dark elemental is usually the clutter.
Yeah, that one I buy, that one I have a problem with, and behind these curtains here, y'all, is the basement full of doom boxes. In fact, we got our furnace replaced earlier this
Oh
year,
god.
and we had to rearrange quite a few of the doom boxes. And I had a stack of empty, pretty boxes that I'd gotten but because I saved them to put shit in
Of
to
course.
make my doom boxes pretty. My husband was not happy.
There's a lot to be said about this, but continue your story first.
My husband and I had a whole debate about the empty cardboard boxes, and his reasoning was sound, critters and insects. And I'm like, fine. But also, part of me grievously felt that loss of pretty boxes to make more doom boxes. Such a neurodivergent thing.
Would you like the elemental reason for why?
Sure.
You're compensating for your dark elemental by putting structure in with your earth elemental. Here, let's compartmentalize the doom.
I mean, that's a little on the nose, friend. Thank you very much.
And
All right.
yet accurate.
Very, very accurate. Very accurate.
It's okay. For mine, the main issue is in moving the clutter out of the house once I have sorted it. That's also very on the nose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were just talking about this. I'm like, pay somebody to get it out of the house for you. Like, if that's where you get stuck. And I think that's where I want to spend the last portion of this episode. When you've established that you've got a problem, when you have figured out what the boundaries are, how do you structurally implement the changes?
Well, that very much depends on whether you're actually capable of satisfying your earth elemental on your own. Because not everyone is. And I feel that this is somewhere we tend to attach a lot of shame, particularly if we're neurodivergent, because we grew up being told that a lot of the earth domain things, like structure, order, being, process, system, blah, blah, are morally good, and being unable to do them is morally bad, which is just not the case. However, they are still things that need to be done, just not necessarily by you. If you can do them, absolutely bash on. You probably don't even need me to tell you how to do them. If you can do them, it's you make your list, you make your process, you work with it. If you can't, you need a people or a service or a multiple people and multiple services. But what you do there is you figure out what the most aggravating thing for your earth elemental is and fix that first. often that will be, if you're in business, something to do with either your website or your back end processes or talking to other people and filling in forms and stuff like that. If you're not in business, it could be as simple as you need a cleaner to come in and fix your processes occasionally, or you need a buddy to sit with you while you go through whatever
Right.
paperwork you need to do, or what have you. But it's not shy about telling you where the issue is. The main stumbling block I've noticed is that people tend to feel some kind of way about not being able to do it.
And I think you're definitely right on about that. We feel a kind of way about it. We struggle to implement because morally we've been told we should be able to do this. So when it comes to asking for help, we have a whole series about that, y'all, with Marisa Lowen. And I encourage you to watch that if that's a place where you struggle. If you are looking to establish assistance in this particular arena, who are we looking for?
Okay, so your earth professionals tend to be a virtual assistant, a personal assistant, a cleaner, a lawyer sometimes, an accountant or bookkeeper or both, um, a web developer rather than a designer. And I say this very specifically as someone that has endured working as both, because the web developer is the one that's going to take care of your back end, make sure that you're up to date, that you're not likely to be hacked, that your code is running smoothly. It's your administrators, it's the people that you can go for to get help with filling out forms for further accommodations, which is a big deal over here anyway, probably there too. And it's the people that can call you on your bullshit as well. Quite apart from anything procedural or practical, it's the people that will tell you when you're violating your own boundaries or when you are not doing the things you said you would do, or when you're caving to demands that you fully intended not to cave to. Because that's the other part of Earth we've not really touched on terribly much, is you pick your hills that you want to die on as well. Or not. You don't have to have hills. A lot of people do, though. And once you've picked them, you then need to defend the fact that they're there. That's your boundaries and your opinions and your what have you. So, friendship wise, they're the ones that will be honest with you, which I feel is a basic prerequisite for friendship. However, not everyone has those, so find them if you don't.
And I think the theme here is these are the people who build structures for you if you are unable. So this is not your coach,
Mm-mm.
because your coach is not building it seems like that should be the
No,
hire here.
your coach is not for this.
Mm-mm.
Where your coach shines is in your fire water balance, which we'll get to more so on a different episode. But the way I look at it broadly is earth and air tend to describe your what, your fire and water tend to be your why, and then your dark and light tend to be your who. So generally, if you're trying to fix a problem with either air or earth, you're looking for someone that is going to do a specific thing. For earth, that is structure. For air, that's usually communication, but we can get more into that next time.
But there's a real balance here, and it's The importance here of defining the inner landscape and figuring out what those needs are can't be overstated, because I don't want to hire a social media manager if what I actually need is somebody to deal with my customer service relations, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of clarity to be found in what's missing. So that's who. Structurally, they're building things for us. What does it look like when Earth is healthy? And, bunny rabbit ears here, healthy,
Air quotes,
air
anyhow.
quotes, healthy, when we are using assistance to construct that?
Okay, so I think Earth's main concern is that things are in place. It doesn't so much care who does the putting it in place, but if it's working, then you'll feel generally more settled. You'll be able to interact with the systems that have been put in place and feel supported and lifted up by them rather than constrained by them. Like, they're flexible enough, whoever you've hired or whatever system it is, to take the input that you are giving it rather than a specific type of input that you can only put in certain scenarios. It has to be adaptive. It has to be able to change with you and your priorities, but also you shouldn't feel the need to change your priorities and what you're doing every 5 seconds.
And it's that management aspect that's really important, I think. If you require, and in a business, you're going to require people to help manage your Earth, then what does it look like to manage those people?
What it looks like is either people that can correctly interpret. Sorry, one moment. Anyway, no, it's people that
Allergy
can.
season. I feel you
Yes.
deeply.
Just the dry, and I'm like chugging water and it's not working. Anyway, yeah, so it's either people that can correctly interpret what you actually need to have done based on the words you are using, whether you are using the correct words or not, or it's having someone who will take what you are saying and then disseminate that information to the people that need to act on it.
Yep, I think that's about right. Okay. Wrap us up. Where do you want to leave us with Earth today?
I'm so sorry, I'm giggling because when you asked that, I immediately went to, well, don't take it for granted. But I just can't. You are muted, by the way.
It's just so on brand for you to break out a pun. It's fine.
I can't. You said wrap it up, and I'm like, well, we have all the puns, and that was maybe the best one.
That was the best one. Don't
It
take it for
was.
granted.
Yes, absolutely. But no, see, the thing about Earth is it is very much the workhorse of the elementals. It's so easy to just forget it's there when things are working and grind to a halt when things are not working. Because it's vital. It's literally the structure on which everything else is built. And if it's not happy, no one is happy. But it's also the most invisible a lot of the time.
Certainly is the systems, which I'm going to be the first to say systems are difficult to see when they work well. And that is the disadvantage here. because if it's working well, you're not going to know your earth
Well,
is there. I mean, you'll
it's
know, but
like special effects in that way. I trained in film and all that wonderful stuff at one point or another. And there was a quote that always stood out to me there. And it's that good visual effects, you never even know they were there at all, ever. So you can have flashy ones that everyone likes, or you can have good ones.
well, and we already talked about the flashy ones. And when you do that, burnout. Like
Oh, yes.
that's usually what
Like,
happens.
so fast. It's horrible. And then the way back is terrible.
Burnout, swamps. This was a whole like adventure here. Okay.
Yeah, it's easily the most dramatic when it goes wrong.
hmm Well, I don't know. We haven't gotten to water yet.
I mean, no, I'd still say Earth's more dramatic when it goes wrong because water still conforms to Earth
I
a
mean, when
lot of
I
the time.
flooded my inner landscape, I couldn't.
Yeah, you didn't flatten your mountains. You
That's
didn't
true.
kill off your trees. You didn't destroy your crops. You just had water over it.
Over everything. It was
Yeah,
terrible, y'all.
it
It was
was a
terrible.
flood,
It
but
was
it wasn't
the Great Flood is
let's
awful.
destroy everything. Whereas Earth will and does.
And I feel like this one, for me, Earth is personal. It's I Virgo rising, so it is systems, and those things matter to me a great deal. And I have always been very earthbound. And also, I don't think that you have to be able to make these things
No,
work for you.
I mean,
I know plenty of airy fairy
your landscapes
waterbound people.
will
hmm
look like, well, like you, frankly, but you do still have Earth, even if it's not making you more of a steady, staid, orderly person. It will still be there. Because if it's not, even your airy fairy peeps are not doing things.
Well, I
You'll
mean, as
know,
you pointed out, it's still at the bottom of the ocean. So,
like, it's never not there. But when it's unhappy, it's felt all across the system.
and I think it's important to recognize that fixing it doesn't make you a boring person. Like truly that's something
Oh,
that comes up
no.
for my people a lot is that implementing systems will take something away inherently from who you are as a person, and that's just not the case.
No. So when you fix Earth, you know what happens? You get sometimes, again, variances for people, but you'll get things like massive mountains that people couldn't hope to scale. You'll get things like vast fields of all different types of crops. You will get fantastical flowers that don't exist and haven't existed and yet somehow do because they've blended together. You'll get deep forests, you'll get deserts if you want deserts. You'll get all sorts of things that no, it's literally just the home and habitat for everything else. And it'll look the way you do. If you've got a weak earth elemental just now, or one that is too strong, or whatever, and it's out of balance, fixing it won't make you fundamentally different. It will still take whatever shape you would have taken in your health. And that'll look different for everybody, but definitely don't avoid fixing your elementals just because you're worried about being boring. If anything, it'll make you more internally consistent and able to show up as yourself.
And that's the importance of the balance here, I think. All right, friend. So next time, air.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll need to think of a good pun for air.
Yes, you will need to think of a good pun for air. Do you have any resources currently available for this? Is the bingo
For
good for this
air
one?
specific. Oh, yeah. The bingo would probably be relatively good for Earth. It's more of a. It's Earth light actually, because it'll please your air as well. It's like the toe dip of Earth. The other thing that might help a little bit is the sales call sheets, if you do a lot of those, because it just provides a base structure to follow, which also cheers Earth up a little. In terms of other resources, probably those are your best ones right this second, but there'll be more made. And like, I'm sure I've written about Earth actually. I might have gotten that far. So
All right, y'all. That's battlesworthfighting.com. The bingo card is a staple in my work life. There's several. I print up different ones every month depending on what I need to focus on. And trust, if you do those things, it does make a difference.
I've just remembered the other thing that I made but have not yet put up because I'm a disaster. The the weekly planning sheets, which I will get up quickly now because I have a reason.
Because now
But
you've mentioned them and there's motivation to do
I
so.
made them. They're just not physically there, but they are very pretty. And yeah, they would probably work too. But bingo is there.
Mhm. Bingo. I love my bingo sheets. I've mentioned my bingo sheets to a number of folks because really, like, there's nothing better than giving yourself a gold star. Nothing.
And the really nice thing about the bingo is it's built in against burnout
Hmm.
because you're not allowed to just do it all.
Hmm. I still happen to be an overachiever and do
We've had
try and
fights about
oh,
this.
we have had fights about this and do try to like get myself a blackout every month, but that's not the goal. The
No.
goal, it really is, it's a bingo. It's do some of these things like
Mhm. It's more also if you find yourself avoiding certain squares every time, you know you have a problem with those squares.
yeah, and that's good information for you to have as you go forward and try to find the people to help you ease those things for you. All right, y'all. We'll be back in 2 weeks for air with a better pun. We will see you all then. Thanks so much for
Bye,
being here today.
everybody.
We'll talk to you then. Bye.